Welcome to your favorite program, Books and Nooks of Hope. I am your host, Philip Guy, and in this program we talk about books, nothing else but books. And today we have a guest in studio, and it's none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei. Pastor Stephen Sisei is a long-experienced editor who works with Africa Herald Publishing House, and he's been editing books there for many years. He has a vast experience with books. Welcome to the studio, Pastor Sisei.
Thank you for hosting me today.
And thank you. Today we are talking about a very, very important book written by Dr. Willie and Elaine Oliver. And which book is this? Hope for Today's Families. So I'm glad you're watching. Sit right back there and enjoy as we devour this book today, guided by Pastor Stephen Sisei. And I'll ask you, Pastor, why should we have a book entitled Hope for Today's Families?
I believe this book would not have come at a better time because there are so many challenges that families are facing today. And this book is coming at a time where we live, like he's writing in the blurb of the book, that says we live in challenging times. Our lives are saturated by information, activities, and senseless expectations. These stresses of modern life make healthy relationships more difficult to achieve and sustain. So these are the experiences that many couples have, or many people who are in relationships face every day. So this book is coming to give them hope if they are struggling with their relationships or in their relationships.
And so because of these struggles, now we have issues of rampant divorce and faithfulness and, carelessness in marriage. Is that what you're talking about, Pastor?
Yes, it is because even today's news is filled with couples who either murder each other or they have to divorce because of the challenges they're facing, and they don't have a way or an avenue in which they can mitigate the challenges that they are facing. So this book is very timely. Hope for today's families.
Now, when Dr. Willie and Elaine Oliver begin this book, they talk about a family as God's invention. How does God come in to invent the family or to invent marriage? How does that come in, Pastor?
Yes, thank you for the question. You see, they are very specific in addressing the genesis of a family or how a family comes together, where God in his own wisdom decided that they should be a couple that will live together. So he created a man and he created a woman in whom they were to establish a relationship and work together. If you see in page 13, for example,
Page 13.
yes, he says, despite God's plan for happiness of family, we all know things have not always worked well, and we are supposed to, husbands and wife, and often don't get along. So it is God's intention that being failure to look at God or him as a source or the beginner of the relationship.
Now, Pastor, when you talk about God as the beginner of this relationship, you actually mentioned what is recorded in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26 and 27
Yes.
about a man and a woman.
And a woman.
What about these ones? Today we are hearing of a man getting married to a man or a woman getting married to a woman. Is that also part of God's invention?
Yeah, it is unfortunate that man has deviated from what God had intended for them to have. And that is why the social ills or the morals that have failed in the society is because what God had intended or when he began or established the institution of marriage, man has somehow deviated from what he had begun. And they have failed and begun their own things, which is not part of what God had intended for them. So it is in God's intention for a man and a woman, not any other option.
Nothing more, nothing less than that.
Nothing less as opposed to what man is doing at the moment.
Now, in one of the chapters, Dr. Willie and Elaine talks about God's way. There must be God's way of running a family, and that other way which is not God's way. So what is this other way which is not God's way?
Yeah, thank you. Like we have said, God is the one who established the institution of marriage.
Yes.
So therefore, he gave the parameters in which man and woman would operate so that they will be happy in their relationship. So when God created them, he gave us the counsel that we can find in the Bible as outlining how we will live together so that we enjoy our relationship. Yes.
So which is God's way now?
Yeah, God's way here is so that we live and spend time together.
As husband and wife?
Yes, as
Or
husband.
as parents and children?
And equally as parents and children, because out of the marriage, we will have establishing a family where it is a father and mother, and we have children in this case. So God intends that we exist in an environment where love is paramount. And that can be seen also in page 19, for example, where he talks of where we need to have love in the family.
Now, you mentioned that word love. It seems to be the most important ingredient and probably the most absent ingredient in most families. Why is this so? The word love seems to be very elusive in families today.
From the outline that we have been given, or the guidelines that this book will suggest for every family to live into so that they live in hope, is because, unfortunately, the contemporary world has misused that word love.
It's
or
actually
the
been
meaning.
misused.
It is the misuse of the word love, or the definition itself, rather. The definition of the word.
Yes.
Where people don't exemplify God's intention. Because once we live together and we are guided by principles of love, then we will be able to live. If you read in this book, they talk of an emotional bank account.
An emotional bank account. Tell us about that.
Yes, in this emotional bank account, it is more or less like the way we keep money in the bank.
In our banks.
Yes, so that you will always have a reserve. But if you continue taking away from the bank, you'll obviously have a problem. Next time, you need resources.
Just like you would bank in Equity or in
or any other
Barclays
bank
or
for
any
that
other
matter.
bank.
So as a family unit, we need to have an emotional bank where out of love now, that is where love comes in, out of love, we are able to do things for each other that at the end of the day, we are complementing each other in the way we relate.
So if a husband does good things towards the wife, he's actually depositing in the emotional bank account.
That is it.
And the wife would actually do the same.
Would do the same. So absence of love will mean it will reach a point as you are going or apart. It will reach a point where you will no longer be able to relate well because
you've been withdrawing.
You've been withdrawing,
and you're not depositing
anything in your account. Yes.
So how I wish we could all be depositing love in our emotional account so that at the end of the day we can reap the good thereof.
Yes.
Now, Pastor Sisei, tell us, we've mentioned when establishing a family, there is the husband and the wife, and thereafter comes in children. Does Willie and Elaine Oliver talk about these children and how to bring them up in a family?
Yes, that is addressed in chapter 3.
In chapter 3, yes.
Of this book, where they are telling us how to parent for success.
Yes, parenting for success.
For success. That is key. Because many people are not raising their children. They are letting them grow up.
The children are just left to grow on their own.
Out on their way.
They have to maneuver and figure out how to.
So I think this book is very important because it will give guidelines on how to raise successful future generations in the way we will bring up our children, because there are so many challenges that we are facing in the society today, or the things that our children in the process of growing up, they find out some things that if you don't guide them as a parent, then obviously you will have failed.
Now tell me, Pastor, whose responsibility is this? Because parents simply take their children and hand them over to teachers in school and expect teachers to work out miracles. The teachers on the other side expect the parents to work out something before bringing their children to school. Sometimes they're left to the churches and, counselors in churches, and sometimes just peer groups. Others are just leaving their children to the television so that the television could map out charter the way for their children. Whose responsibility is it to bring up children?
Yes, for there to be success in parenting, if you instill values or character in your child, then irrespective of the environment, the child will still be able to maintain the principles that were instilled in them in the process of growing up. That is the success of parenting.
So the parents have an initial responsibility.
Yes, of instilling values to their children. So that in as much as there is a process of going to school and less time for you as a parent being with them, they can be able to remain principled in a new environment. Because you have instilled with them a principle, and principles don't change, irrespective of the environment in which you are in. You'll always stand for what is right.
It reminds me of the Bible verse, train up a child in the way he should go, and he will always, he will never depart from it.
That is Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6.
Proverbs 22 and verse 6.
Yes.
Now, does Willie and Elaine Oliver outline some of these principles for parenting for success?
Yes, they have outlined ways in which we can help our children grow by being with them. So it is necessary for you as a parent to be aware. And by the way, that is page 32.
Page 32.
It is necessary for you as a parent to be aware of your child's emotions. And if you take time to spend with your children, you will know how to guide them. Because they sometimes, because of the interactions, they may not be exhibiting the correct one. So the second one that is outlining here is listen sincerely to your child.
A lot of parents don't have time to listen.
They don't have time to listen.
They probably just want to talk, and never give children time to talk back to them.
Or to give a response, or explain what might have they have been intending, as it were. So, and then he said, help your child find ways to label the emotions they are feeling. You see, it's still part of your responsibility as a parent to guide your child. And then he says, set limits while exploring solutions to the problems at hand.
So parents have a role of setting limits.
Yes, you have to give parameters to your child in which they will operate within.
No further than this, no further than this.
Yes,
Okay.
it is a way of instilling values in your child. And once those are ingrained, then obviously they will be part of the character in which they will be showing every day.
Now, the first point you mentioned is that the parents need to be aware of the child's emotions.
Yes.
How do you as a parent get to be aware of the emotions your child is going through? Maybe anger, maybe frustration, maybe stress. How do parents get to be aware of this?
The simplest way of understanding the emotion of your child is being there for your child.
Being there for your child.
Being there all the time. The way you will relate, you will come to understand your child. Because again, children have different temperaments, and all children are not the same in a family.
They are never the same.
They are never the same. So it is in relating with them is when you will come to know and appreciate or understand what they feel or what they go through. So but by sharing with them, you will be able to know.
But you know what, Pastor? In these days, parents say they are so busy, busy at work, and when they come home, they are tired, or maybe they want to catch up with news as they watch TV, so they have no time to be with their children. When will they ever understand their emotions?
That is why parenting for success necessitates that you be available for your children.
You have to create time for that.
You have to create time for them. So as you relate with your children, and I think most importantly, like they say in page 35, parents must let their values be seen and heard. They must be exhibiting the same values they are trying to instill in their children, as opposed to just not preaching water and drinking wine, like they say. Like the old saying goes.
So you must preach what you actually practice.
Yes. Whatever you are trying to instill in your child, you should also be exhibiting the same.
So in other words, parents also ought to be role models for their children.
Exactly. Parents ought to be role models. So it is imperative that if you have to parent for success, you have to be exhibiting the same for you, so that you don't contradict yourself as a parent.
Now, Willie and Elaine Oliver talk about rock and sand. It reminds me of this Bible verse of one man built his house on the rock, and the other one built his house on the sand. And we know the one who built his house on the rock, when the winds and the waves came, the house stayed. But the one who built on the sand, it was swept away. What does all this mean, Pastor?
Yes, what Dr. Elaine Oliver and Willie Oliver and Elaine Oliver are suggesting to us for having sound families is that the values of a Christian and that of a parent are actually the same guiding principles that we all have to have if we have to succeed in our relationships as family.
Yes.
Yes. So that there is no difference in the requirements of a Christian and in the requirements of a parent or a family, for that matter. For example, when Jesus is, if you read in page 41, when Jesus is speaking about the principles of heaven in the Sermon on the Mount,
Yes, yes.
he says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 and 28, about how man is supposed to relate with another woman, so that you don't lust. The Bible actually says, you have heard that it was said of those of all, you shall not commit adultery. But he also had another principle by saying, even if you lust,
Looking at a woman lustfully, you have already committed adultery.
Committed sin. So in as much as that is a principle of Christianity, it also impacts the family.
The family.
Because it is actually a man and a woman.
One and the same thing.
One and the same thing.
Okay.
So it is how we will establish our Christian principles that will be successful in our
So
families.
in other words, our Christian principles need to be set on the solid rock.
On the solid rock. That is Jesus Christ
Where
himself.
when other things come, it will not beat and blow our house and then our house crumple down.
No, yes.
Okay. So this Hope for Today's Families must be a very important book for families living in this day and age.
It has, like I said, it has come at the right time.
At the right time.
At the right time, because the level of immorality that we see today in the world and the many challenges that people are facing, this book has come to restore what God had put in the family or in the institution. So they are saying there is hope.
There is hope.
Even if you have challenges in your family, there is hope for you today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. You're watching Books and Nooks of Hope. I am Philip Guy, your host, and our guest on studio today is none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei, and a senior editor at Africa Herald Publishing House, and is here today to guide us on a very, very important book, Hope for Today's Families, by Dr. Willie and Elaine Oliver. So we'll be right back after the break. Don't go away. Keep it Hope Channel. Welcome back to your favorite program, Books and Nooks of Hope. I am Philip Guy, your host as always. And today on studio we have none other than Pastor Stephen Sisei, our senior editor at Africa Herald Publishing House with many years of experience dealing with books. And today we are discussing a very, very important book, Hope for Today's Families. We've just looked at the aspects of parenting. We've just looked at issues of, broken homes. And now, Pastor Sisei, tell us about this intimacy between husband and wife. Pastor Willie and Elaine talks about that in chapter 5. What is there for us in this chapter?
Thank you. Chapter 5 is actually becoming intimate allies. And the emphasis of this chapter is so that actually the way they've introduced this chapter, there is a phrase which they're saying, getting married is easy, staying married is more difficult.
Getting married is easy. Staying married is more difficult.
Is more difficult. So staying happily married for a lifetime would be considered among the fine arts. That is an old saying. So it is necessary. We are putting two people together, husband and wife.
And remember, these people have come from different families, but they are now coming to be joined together to form one family.
Establish one unit. So it is necessary for them to have a common understanding or a common bond because they have different backgrounds. They have to forge ahead as one team or as one unit. So it is necessary, like the defining intimacy here in marriage is found along that of an affectionate bond, the strands of which are composed of mutual caring, responsibility, trust, open communication of feelings and sensations, as well as non-defended interchange of information about significant events. So that is something that, okay, let me say it is a tie that binds.
Okay, it is the tie that will bind this couple
This
together.
couple together.
So that the two of them can have some, common thought or common, understanding of basic things in life.
Yes, let's say they will have a united front because they have come from different backgrounds. The intention now is as a unit, they move forward together as a team.
Now, one thing you've mentioned there is communication, and I believe he deals with communication in details in chapter 6. If you talk about to many couples around, one of the biggest problems that they would definitely be facing is communication. How does Willie and Elaine handle this aspect of communication?
Yeah, it is important for a couple to be able to communicate well. Many times we listen to respond, not to understand what is being said.
So someone speaks, but I'm listening in order to respond.
To give a response, not necessarily
To
understanding what is being said. And they're addressing the importance of communication in a family, for that matter, so that we have an intentional way in which we are communicating either our feelings or our thoughts in a manner that will be understood, and the family unit will grow stronger, because either we will not say hurtful words, or we will not say disparaging words, or we will not use words that at the end of the day somebody feels your spouse or your partner or your child feels belittled. And the fact that they're using grace, communicating.
Now, I was just about to ask that. I've read many books on communication within marriage, but I've never found an author talk about communication with grace. What is this grace, Pastor? Tell us about this.
Yeah, the way the link of the grace here is more or less like the Bible is defining grace, where it is something that is unmerited, some unmerited favor.
Yes.
So many times in the way we will relate is because there are things that can be done by your spouse or even your child, for that matter, that things that will either make you discouraged or
annoyed or just unhappy
for whatever has transpired, either when you are there or when you are
not
away.
Around. Yes.
So the necessity of you still maintaining your cool, so that you are able to relate to them as before without this problem that has arisen. So there are times where people will say what we don't like. But that will not stop you from still telling them what you feel, or either finding a way to communicate with them without hurting them because of them saying what you have not liked.
So that is where grace comes in.
Yes.
So you communicate with someone positively in spite of or irrespective of whatever has transpired.
That is key. That is what you are supposed to be saying. So let me cite something here in page 57 where he says,
page 57,
page
yes.
57. When someone says something to us we don't like, we tend to respond quickly and in a similar manner. However, to communicate with grace, to respond in a way they do not deserve, you need to be proactive, to live in your cycle of control, to pause, so that you have time to catch your breath before saying something that will cause equal pain or make things worse. So you see now, it should be intentional on your part.
Yes.
For you not to respond in a manner similar to what your partner or your spouse or your child has said.
Okay.
You have
because
to maintain your cool.
When they say something that annoys me, and then I react to it,
Yes.
I'm actually not solving the problem but aggravating it, isn't it?
Yes, yes. It is like adding salt to an injury.
Adding salt to
Yes,
injury.
yes.
Okay, now, Pastor, today, as you had mentioned a little earlier, we read in the newspapers, we watch television, we listen to the radio, and media is full of violence within families. You know, a man has hacked the wife, you know, a wife has hacked the husband, you know, someone has just slain the children, and there's a lot of violence. What does Elaine and Willie tell us about this violence and, you know, these bad things that happen in our families?
Yes, thank you. That is chapter 7 of this book. We don't have an excuse for abuse in our families.
There's no
There is
excuse.
absolutely no excuse. And that we have to maintain our cool, all that, like I've said in the previous
But Pastor, it's happening and it's so rampant.
Unfortunately, man has allowed the devil to reign in their homes, and they have forgotten their actual intention. You see, chapter 1 was saying, marriage is God's invention.
Right?
So if we leave God outside the home, obviously we are giving room for the devil to come and reign.
And that's where violence comes in, and abuse.
All the time. If we have such situations, so it is intentional for God for us to live happy lives in our relationships. We'll be happy. So by inviting God to be able to see us through in the affairs of our lives, so that we avoid the excesses that are there in relationships. They have cited here in page 65, either physical abuse. We have to restrain ourselves from physical abuse, harming our spouse or even our children. There is still the element of sexual abuse.
Yes, yes.
Where people have gone to the extremes or the excesses that are there, or even emotional abuse, because there are couples or there are spouses who may not be physically abusing, but they are either sexually abusing their spouse or they are emotionally abusing their spouse.
And Pastor, I'm just thinking that there could be some people who are vulnerable or maybe victims of such abuse, but they're just quiet about it. They have nowhere to vent, nowhere to share their frustrations and feelings. Could that be true, Pastor?
Yeah, it is true, and that part is actually addressed in this book as well, so that people are able to see or to find, to mitigate the challenges that they're having by seeking help. Because in these domestic problems that people face every other time, there is misuse of power. So one needs to seek intervention so that to avoid harm that may come to them. Because many times it is in the manner in which we relate every day that creates all these problems. And it is necessary to check these things before they come. And that is why the emphasis is on God's principles. If you read in page 69, it says, God's love and grace gives us the power. You see, it is God's grace.
God's love and His grace.
Yes. That is what will enable us to chart ways to avoid some of these challenges that may arise in our families.
Now, Pastor Sisi, as you mentioned earlier, when we have avoided the path that God shattered and have given room for the devil, today we experience people who are going through marital distress. In fact, there are people who are married but living as if they were not married, and ultimately ending in divorce. What does Willie and Elaine Oliver in this book tell us about this marital distress, which actually ends up in divorce?
Yes, that is addressed in chapter 8. And in this chapter, they are outlining how we will prevent marital distress and divorce. Because the reality is, as they're mentioning, there is an increase.
There is indeed an increase.
There is an increase in divorce or distress. In the, as you've rightly put it, there are people who are just staying together, more or less like for convenience.
But or maybe because they already have children, they don't feel like they should separate because the children are already there.
Yes. So it is for them, they want us to find ways in which we can solve these things that will create distress in our homes. And if
are the solutions listed right here?
these solutions are listed in this book, Hope for Today's Families. If you go to page 75,
Page 75.
the first one they're saying, build your marriage on real love. It is necessary, based on the quote of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, they're outlining what Paul wrote to the Corinthians.
Yes.
That love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, love does not boast, it is not arrogant. So if we build our relationship on love,
how I wish all of us would build our families on this kind of foundation.
yes, then we will be avoiding the distresses that will arise in our families. Secondly, they say, accept each other's faults and imperfections.
Yeah, you know, we are human beings. There is no one of us who is perfect.
Who is perfect. So we have to find a way of understanding the temperaments of our spouse, so that we are able to find or avoid the distresses that will arise if we fail to accept each other. The third one is saying, listen to each other.
Yes.
Listen. It is important for us to
Listen
have
to each other.
time to listen to what our spouse is
Remember,
saying.
you said earlier many times you just want to talk. And as we listen in order to respond.
Yes, that is unfortunate.
Yeah.
The other point they're mentioning is forgive offense. It is important.
That's a difficult word for most people. Forgiving. Then you are adding forgiving often.
Yes, we have to. Actually, the Bible says you forgive 70 times 7.
70 times 7.
So it is.
In other words, it's infinite. Eh?
There is no limit to forgiveness. Just like God forgave us without any
conditions.
Without any conditions.
Yeah.
And His love is limitless. The other point he says, hug more.
Hug more.
Yes. Of course, a hug is a way of expressing our emotions.
It shows the other person that they have been embraced.
They're being embraced.
Okay. Now, Pastor, as we are winding up towards the end, there are those families that are probably not in a marriage relationship. Maybe those who are single. Some have chosen to be single. Some probably never found a spouse to be married to. Or some probably have lost a loved one in death. Is there hope for such families? There are single parent families. There are people who are just living single on their own. Is there hope for them? You know, they're also families.
Yeah, that is a part that they are addressing in chapter 9 of this book, where they say finding peace as a single person.
Finding peace as a single
as
person.
a single person. Of course, God's intention is that, like outlined in the Bible, if you see page 82, for example, they say here it was at the very beginning that God declared in Genesis, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So it is important that we find room or find a spouse for that matter. But in the event that those avenues are not available for us, there is still a way in which we can have fulfilling lives or remaining in a manner that will still exemplify or uplift Christ in the way you lead your life, even as a single person.
Okay.
We can still be able to glorify God in that single life that we are living, and avoiding the excesses that are occasioned by the moral decay in the society.
Okay. Now, Pastor, why is this book called Hope for Today's Family? Why the word hope?
Hope is something that is becoming elusive for many people, and that is why many are into depression. Many, even because of depression, they commit suicide.
Yes,
or
yes.
they end up having, because they don't have where to turn to. So this book is such that you have a way of living your life with purpose. You have a way of living your life with a given direction that will always get you out of the challenges that you are facing. It does not mean that if you have challenges, your life has ended as a couple or as a family. There is something that you can live for.
Okay.
All we need to do is just invite Christ into our home. And the book will help us understand and appreciate more how to live together meaningfully Yes.
Now you call this book from Africa Herald the Book of the Year. What does it mean to have this as the Book of the Year?
The book, it is a book that is intended for distribution to help other people get acquainted with the message of hope. So this is a book, the Seventh Adventist Church every year produces a book that is able to make every individual get acquainted with the message of hope. So this year is the Family Ministries Department of the General Conference is celebrating 100 years of existence as a ministry to the families. And this book is equally timely because it will give hope.
So someone can actually buy several copies and distribute this book for free?
Distribute to as many people as you are able to reach them.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's all that we had time for today. This is your favorite program, Books and Nooks of Hope. I'm your host, as always, Philip Guy, and our guest on studio has been Stephen Sizei, who is our editor at Africa Herald Publishing House, guiding us through the Book of the Year, Hope for Today's Families. Thank you for joining us. Be blessed.